Hi everyone! Welcome back to the First Unitarian Church of Honolulu's virtual religious education program. As we continue on with stories this week from Moral Tales, a curriculum from the UUA. Today's chalice lighting comes to us from Josh, Prudence, and Percival Roburn, 3 children who wrote this chalice lighting for their mother. We are all flames. When we gather hand in hand, our church, our community, our home, we inspire, we celebrate, we come together, sharing our light of hope for our shared future. This week's story is called The Messiah Among Us. Mr. Cohen was a teacher of the most quarrelsome 3rd grade class you could ever imagine. The kids in the class argued about everything. They argued about who should stand at the front of the line. They argued about what games to play during recess. They argued about who was the best reader in the class. They argued about who was best at math. And Mr. Cohen asked them whether it was rainy or sunny outside, and they even argued about that. Mr. Cohen was at his wit's end. There was so much arguing going on that no one was learning anything. When they tried to do multiplication problems, Janie and Stan argued whether 2 times 2 was the same as 2 plus 2 or not. When it was time for spelling, Carmen and Ling began to quibble about who should get the turn in line for the spelling bee. In music class, Carlos and Beth even tried to grab the tambourine, and Carlos ended up in the nurse's office when the tambourine hit him in the head. Oh, he had tried everything. He promised the class an ice cream party. He bribed them with cookies. He even threatened them. He told them he'd send them to the principal's office, but nothing worked. Mr. Cohen had called the parents. He tried very politely asking the kids to stop, but nothing was left to do. Mr. Cohen went that day to his synagogue on the Sabbath, and he prayed. His rabbi noticed the look of despair and went to sit by him. The rabbi listened to Mr. Cohen's tale of the most difficult, argumentative 3rd grade class in history. When she heard it all, she simply said, "Stay home from work tomorrow and leave it to me." That Monday, the kids walked into their classroom and found the rabbi sitting at Mr. Cohen's desk. Of course, they immediately began to argue about whether Mr. Cohen was sick or whether Ms. Sanchez had finally gotten so tired of the steady stream of arguing children that showed up at her office every day that she'd fired him. But the rabbi just sat and she listened. She didn't yell or try to interrupt them. She didn't plead or scold. She simply sat quietly at Mr. Cohen's desk. After a while, the kids began to wonder what was going on. The arguments gradually died down as the kids watched the rabbi to see what would happen next. When the classroom was finally quiet, the rabbi slowly stood up. "Mr. Cohen will not be here today. I am your substitute teacher, but I have only one thing to teach you. Listen carefully, as I will not repeat it." The kids were too surprised to argue. The rabbi's voice rang out in the stunned silence. "Last night in my dreams, God told me there was a Messiah among you." They argued, of course. Pandemonium broke out in the classroom as the kids argued about who might be the Messiah. Couldn't be Charles, he was always getting into mischief. But on the other hand, he was always helpful if a friend needed something from his lunch. What about Janie? She always did her work so neatly and carefully. The arguing didn't stop overnight. And when Mr. Cohen returned to school on Tuesday, the first thing he heard was Stan's angry voice. "I'm telling you, Carmen, Bobby is the Messiah. Just the other day I saw him comforting a little 1st grader who had scraped her knee. Isn't that the sort of thing a Messiah would do?" Soon, however, the arguments did begin to disappear. When Janie began to argue that Charles and she should be the line leader, she suddenly offered to stand behind him in line. After all, Charles might be the Messiah. And in music class, Carlos and Beth took turns using the tambourine. After all, one of them might be the Messiah. All that year, the kids kept trying to figure out who it could be. They began to think about each other differently. They noticed all of the good things about each other. Stan was a great artist with a huge imagination. Ling was passionate and strong. Carmen was the most loyal friend you could ask for. As for Mr. Cohen, he was a gentle, kind teacher. Maybe he was the Messiah. The kids also began to think about themselves differently. Each child wondered, could I be the Messiah? The children were inspired to be the best people they could be. Soon the kids in Mr. Cohen's class had a reputation for treating one another so well. Teachers came from far and wide to visit the class and ask Mr. Cohen for teaching tips. The year ended, and the kids in Mr. Cohen's class graduated having learned a very important lesson they would never forget. Everyone around you is special, and everyone could be a Messiah. The next fall, Mr. Cohen looked at his brand new class of third graders. Already, John and Anna were arguing about whether or not alligators were the same as crocodiles. "Good morning, children," he began. "Has anyone here heard of a Messiah or know what it could be?" He lowered his voice to a whisper, so everyone had to be quiet and listen. He said, "I've been told there is a Messiah in this class." Thanks, everyone.